I knew I was never going to walk again, ever. I couldn't feel anything from my neck down.
Now, being a pro wrestler isn't exactly the safest job there is. There's a huge degree of risk with every single move that a wrestler performs, and from time to time, injuries do occur and they can result in wrestlers being on the injured list for months or even sometimes years, but still carrying on a match. Join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at 10 WWE superstars who finished a match with a devastating injury. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos, and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists.
He did serious damage to his neck, and he was still able to kick out of that. I mean, that says a lot.
Number 10, Mickie James. WWE doesn't just produce Raw and SmackDown every week, they produce a number of live events which traditionally take place on weekends. These live events mean that the WWE superstars spend 3 to 4 days per week on the road, and due to this hectic schedule, this makes injuries a lot more common. Take for instance the injury that legendary superstar Mickie James suffered back in 2019. Mickie was wrestling Carmella when she suffered an ACL tear in the middle of the match. This is one of the most serious injuries that an athlete of any kind can suffer, and it can result in them being out of action for up to 12 months. Mickie underwent knee surgery and she was actually out of action for 14 months, which just goes to show how severe the injury truly was. Number 9, Edge. When Edge made his return to WWE at the 2020 Royal Rumble, fans were curious as to whether Edge was really ready to return to the ring. Edge had previously retired 9 years earlier, and the nature of this injury was rather serious. Edge managed to wrestle in the Rumble match itself, as well as a match with Randy Orton at Wrestlemania. However, during his third match, he would once again suffer a major injury. This match would once again be against Orton, and this time a match titled The Greatest Wrestling Match Ever. Edge suffered a torn tricep during the match, and thankfully Edge's neck was fine, or it would have been likely that Edge would have been forced to retire yet again. Nevertheless, a torn tricep is still serious, and it meant that Edge missed 7 months of action. No credit should be offered towards Edge, who continued the 45-minute match where it could have been easily called off. Number 8, Hardcore Holly. Considered by many to be one of the toughest wrestlers in all of pro wrestling, Hardcore Holly suffered a broken arm in a match in 2000 and somehow continued to wrestle. The injury took place during a match against Kurt Angle, and Angle, who was still relatively new to WWE at this stage, performed a trademark moonsault. However, Angle landed incorrectly, and all of his body weight came crashing down on Holly's arm. Holly's arm was instantly broken, but being the pro he was, he managed to finish the match as was initially planned. Number 7, Marty Garner. The name Marty Garner may not be publicly known to many wrestling fans, but when you realize that Marty was the individual who Triple H dropped right on his head during a pedigree in the 90s, who Marty is becomes quite apparent. In a match between the two men, Triple H performed his trademark pedigree. However, Marty landed right on his head, and this resulted in him suffering a neck injury which kept him off the shelf for an extended period. Marty was so annoyed that Triple H had injured him that he personally sued WWE, and he actually received an out-of-court settlement. This forced Triple H to change his iconic move moving forward. Previously, Triple H had kept hold of the wrestler's arms when performing the move, but this all changed, and now Triple H was more loose when executing the move, meaning that the opponent could then protect themselves. Number 6, Shawn Michaels. At the start of 1998, Shawn Michaels was the top guy in WWE. He was WWE Champion, and WWE were in the early stages of the Attitude Era. Unfortunately, one match changed everything for the Heartbreak Kid. At the 1998 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, HBK was wrestling The Undertaker in a casket match for the WWE title. During the match, HBK would be back body dropped to the outside of the ring, but his tailbone connected with the casket. HBK herniated 2 discs in his back, and although he would have been in total agony, he somehow continued the match without a hitch. The injury was so severe that HBK was forced to retire following his WrestleMania 14 showdown with Stone Cold Steve Austin. Mr. WrestleMania himself would remain retired for the next 4 years before coming out of retirement in 2002 and staying active in WWE for the next 8 years. Number 5, The Undertaker. The Undertaker has broken his nose twice during his WWE career. He first broke it back in 1995 during a match against Mabel, but more infamously, he actually broke it during a dream match against Rey Mysterio back on SmackDown in 2010. During the match, Mysterio would perform a seated senton, which broke The Undertaker's nose. The Undertaker rather scarily realigned his nose in the middle of the match. The Undertaker revealed that when he realigned his nose, he actually began to see 3 versions of Mysterio due to how stunned he was. Number 4, Randy Orton. And one of the top matches on the One Night Stand 2008 match card was the match between Orton and Triple H for the WWE title. The match was to be a last man standing match, and it would act as the final match in this particular arc for their rivalry. However, when Triple H countered an RKO attempt by throwing Orton over the top rope, Orton broke his collarbone. This was a serious injury and Orton needed medical assistance. However, Orton and Triple H continued the match as they knew that ending a WWE match due to an injury wouldn't be appreciated by fans. Quite smartly, the 2 legendary superstars improvised that Triple H would hit Orton with a sledgehammer on the outside of the ring. Orton would stay down for the count of 10 and the match was able to come to an end. Orton would miss a number of months of action, but was lucky that he was working with a true pro in Triple H who managed to keep him as safe as possible whilst they brought the match to an appropriate close. Number 3, Jeff Hardy. Amazingly, up until 2017, Jeff Hardy had never suffered any major injuries. Although he spent his career diving off ladders and crashing into tables, Hardy had never needed surgery and for the most part his body was in great shape. However, in 2017 this all changed. Hardy suffered a torn rotator cuff during a match on the September 18th edition of Raw. This was a standard 6-pack challenge match and it didn't involve Hardy doing anything too risky. Hardy simply hurt himself by performing basic wrestling moves. The nature of Hardy's injury was rather serious and without treatment, movement in his arm can become virtually impossible. As a result, Hardy would miss around 6 months of action before making his return to WWE television in the best shape he's ever been in. Number 2, Triple H. The 2018 Crown Jewel pay-per-view featured a one-time dream match between DX and the Brothers of Destruction. Unfortunately, the match was a disaster and it should have never taken place. And there are several reasons why the match fell apart. The main reason was because Triple H tore his pec in the middle of the match. And with all due respect to The Undertaker, Kane and Shawn Michaels, Triple H was the one to carry the match. The Undertaker and Kane were semi-retired and HBK hadn't wrestled in 8 years, so the pressure was unfortunately on the game to make the match work. With H's injury, the match quickly went downhill. The pec tear was apparent throughout the match, so much so that Triple H had bruising around his shoulder region and had to finish the match on one arm. And number 1, Seth Rollins. Now in November of 2015, Seth Rollins was in the midst of a 220-day WWE title reign when an injury forced him to surrender the title. Prior to his injury, Rollins' WWE title run was well received by fans. He was having great matches and there appeared to be no sign of stopping him. Unfortunately, Rollins was wrestling Kane at a house show in Dublin, Ireland when Rollins tore his ACL, MCL and medial meniscus in his knee when attempting a sunset flip powerbomb. The injury was one of the worst injuries ever seen during a WWE live event and he would miss 6 months of action. Rollins' injury caused a lot of problems for WWE from a creative perspective. He was their number 1 guy at the time and was set to take on Roman Reigns in the main event of Survivor Series for the WWE title, but obviously these plans were cancelled. They had to restructure the top of the card and thankfully when Rollins returned in May of 2016, it wasn't before long that he was once again in the hunt for the WWE title. But there you have it folks, 10 WWE superstars who finished a match with a devastating injury. Be sure to leave your comments down below and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.